Eagle Community Television presents Community Connection with your host, Mike Cooper.
Hello and welcome again to Community Connection from Eagle Community Television. Thanks for watching, and thanks to our producer, Jeff DeRaw. We're at the Hayes Water Treatment Facility and the wastewater treatment plant located on the 183 bypass in Hayes. Joining us is Superintendent Roger Moerke. Roger, you're no stranger to wastewater treatment business, are you?
No, I've been in the business for about 30 plus years.
You have been in Minnesota, Colorado, and places. You came to us from Colorado and Missouri, right?
That is correct, yep.
One of these days, Jeff's going to have to tell you his Missouri story because he visited Missouri last summer and had Minnesota and had a great time up there on his Harley. So let him tell you that story before we get away today.
Okay.
Okay, so we're at the wastewater treatment plant. Let's talk about the facility itself before we take a little bit of a tour, if we could, Roger.
Okay.
How old is the facility?
Well, there's different portions of it that are different ages. The oldest portion is built in 1953. That's the digester. This right here was built in 1967, and then the last upgrade was in 1993.
So the digester was first. This particular area here, which we're going to show some pictures of, Jeff's going to take some shots of. What is that called? What area is that?
It's called the headworks, and what it does, this is where the flow enters the facility, and we remove, there's a screen in there, it removes rags, any kind of debris, sticks, whatever comes in here, and also we remove grit, there's a grit chamber, and then so the good stuff, the organics, move on through the plant. We want to remove those things. They cause problems further down the plant. So.
And this receives everything from the city of Hayes, is that right? Whether you're washing dishes, taking a bath, or flushing the toilet?
That's correct.
It all comes here first in this particular area. Okay, the facility goes back to 53 then. Your latest upgrade was 93. That's a long time, it seems like, for a facility that's in constant use.
Yeah, it's not that uncommon, actually. But the bad part, I guess, if there is a bad part, is that what was done in 1993 is not going to help us with what we need to do in the future, the near future. We have a new permit that we cannot meet with what we have here. So but that was the last upgrade. That's not going to help us with what we need to do in the future.
Well, and with new technology, new things coming online all the time, you've really got to stay updated, don't you?
Oh, yes.
And what about checks and balances? Do you have an oversight situation that occurs, Roger?
I'm not sure what you mean, but we have to do a lot of maintenance, preventative maintenance. We got a lot of redundancy. You can't just have one pump of something because if that fails, you're completely down. So in most cases, there's going to be 2 or 3 pumps in a position to take over the flow if it needs to be.
One of the things that you'd like to see on your top of your Christmas list, I think, Roger, would be a facility that would be not only upgraded, but perhaps even new. Am I right on that?
Yes. Yeah.
Talk about that a little bit.
Okay. Well, it's not so much what I want, it's what we need to do.
Yeah.
But this plant is antiquated. All this stuff in here all the pumps are quite old. It's quite a challenge to keep them in good repair. The new facility we're just looking at it. We could either upgrade this facility, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done here, and it would be just about, if not as much, to do that as it would be to put in a new facility. So we're looking at both those options with an engineer.
And with the pumps running constantly almost, that's a lot of strain on mechanics, as most people who work with mechanical parts know.
Right, and it's not a good environment. This is wastewater, so it's kind of it's a corrosive environment. It's a harsh environment for equipment, so you got to keep on top of everything that you have out here.
Well, you told me about one example of how the dated part of the facility has caused problems, and that's just in the wiring itself that goes to the various parts of the facility.
Well, you can expect those kind of things, but it seems to be more than I would like occurring. Currently we have a broken wire appears to some equipment out there, so we have to run, that's what the guys are doing today. They're running some wires to get that particular piece of equipment back online.
Well, let's take us through the process then, Roger. We start with the collection area, right?
It's called the headworks, yep.
All right, so everything comes here, and that can include debris, and you were even talking about pieces of lumber, rags, and other things. That could cause some real problems, couldn't it?
Correct. That, and I haven't mentioned what's called the FOG program, or fats, oil, and grease. It's just an awareness for the public that that causes a lot of problems in the collection system as well as here. It's very difficult to deal with and break down. It's the hardest thing to break down. So it causes a lot of problems.
Well, as we would know, you know, when you try to pour grease or fats down the sink, how quickly the plumbing at home can stop up. I can imagine what it would be here.
That's right.
If you included all of that
Yep.
in one collection location.
It's a problem.
Okay, so here, those are separated. The trash basically goes where?
Well, this debris here we take to the landfill.
Okay.
And that's the grits and the rags. Now, like I said early on, this is it's two-part. You got the liquid side and the solid side. The end result is your biosolids, and in our case, we land apply those solids, so it's a benefit to the local farmers.
Okay.
We'll talk about that more later, probably.
All right. So we stop first at the collection site. Then from here, where do we go?
Well, we go to the aeration basins.
All right, let's go see those.
Okay.
Back to our visit at the wastewater treatment plant on the 183 bypass in Hayes with the Superintendent Roger Moerke. And we're at the aeration basins, actually two of them, right, Roger?
That's
What's
correct.
happening here?
Well, this is pretty much the heart of the plant. This is where it's a biological process. I want to mention that. This is not a chemical process, so we rely on bacteria, biology, to do the work for us, to break it down, take the organics, eat them, break it down. And so we got air provided here, as you can see the bubbles out there. We got mixing in here, and we provide the food and the time, so then they just basically eat it. Okay?
And as a biological process, it's a natural process.
natural
You don't
process.
have to add expensive chemicals or things that could interfere with that biological process.
That's correct. Actually, what can happen is if you get a toxic chemical to the process, it can kill our biology. So that's something else that people probably don't realize, but it's a living organism, so it has to be treated as such.
And we see the aeration taking place. How long does this happen then before the water moves on to the next step?
It comes to these two basins, and it's here for just about 20 hours in our case here. So.
Now, how's this facility as far as we were talking about upgrades earlier? How you doing in this particular area? Because this is really the heart of the system.
Well, we are fine with our old permit, but with our new permit, we're not, because basically all we're doing here is removing ammonia, and on our new permit it's called nutrient removal, which is concerning with phosphorus and nitrogen. And we can't do both with this existing facility. So it's either upgrade this existing facility with a lot of extra tankage and basins, and so you're going to be spending very close, if not as much, as if you put in something new. We're looking at both those options. So,
And the new, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say this facility is not able to meet our new permit conditions.
And the new facility would be able to treat both nitrates and phosphorus. You can't treat them both together because they're kind of at odds, aren't they?
That's correct. If you're getting the nitrates out, you're releasing your phosphorus back in these tanks, and that's just not acceptable.
We're at the Hayes Wastewater Treatment Plant with the Superintendent, Roger Moerke. And Roger, what are we standing in front of now?
This is what we call the West Reuse Basin. It is the water that's been treated, and this water here has to meet certain standards and is pumped to the golf course pond, and that's where they irrigate the golf course and the parks, the sports complex and all that out of this basin. We pump it down there, and they pump it out for their usage.
So this is kind of the finished product then before the water is actually usable.
That's correct.
And this is what we would call effluent water?
It's effluent water. We call it reuse water because we have to rechlorinate, if you will. It's a different standard than when we send it out. If we go out to Chitola Creek, we have to dechlorinate it. Here we have to rechlorinate.
Ah, okay. So actually it's going in two different places then. But for the golf course during the summertime, more is going there, but the remainder of the water then is going to Chatola Creek.
That's correct.
What about then during the winter? Does a lot more of that water go?
Yeah, basically in the winter, this is not in use, so all of our flow would be going to Chatola Creek on down to Big Creek.
And this particular water is helping to recharge basically the creek site, right?
Right. It's Russell is the next city down that would benefit from it as far as a recharge, but it winds up eventually in Canopolis Lake. So and that's where a lot of our regulation is coming from, is what they're seeing down in those receiving streams, the high phosphorus and nitrates. So that's why we have to do what we got to do here in the future.
And part of that could be, once again, as we were talking about, reducing the nitrates and phosphorus and having less problem with this green algae problem that we're having in some of our lakes and reservoirs these days.
That's exactly why.
You mentioned pumps too. Almost every one of these stations has a pumping system in place. For the Aeration Basin, we had 2 separate areas with pumps that are actually stirring up the liquid. But there's a lot of pumps out here,
Yes,
Roger.
we have over 50 pumps here on just the plant site, and it doesn't include the lift stations and the golf course ponds. I forgot to mention that we have blowers providing the air to the aeration basin, so there's additional 3, and they're a large expense. They take a lot of energy, but yeah, we have 50 pumps, and it's a challenge to keep all those in operational or working order.
Well, and when you go back as long as this facility has been here, I would imagine, just like any other mechanical situations, parts are getting a little bit more complicated and a little bit more expensive and hard to get.
That's very true. That's a good point. Anything we do here seems like you'd pay more than you would think you would, but it's just part of the industry. Yeah, so parts are that's where sometimes you don't have any choice but to replace. But you're absolutely right. Parts get more expensive. They're hard to come by. And so we have to rely on my talented crew here to keep things going as best. And they do a very good job, by the way.
I was thinking that the guys are working over there now. They've been working on the conduit and things. But once again, those are expenses that could be built into maybe a new facility.
Sure.
We're at the next to the last stop of our tour of the Hayes Water Treatment Plant with Superintendent Roger Moerke. First building we've been in, Roger. What's happening here?
It's just like you said, it's called the sand filter building. There's 2 sides to it. There's media in the filters, primarily sand. There's some carbon in there. It's the final process after it leaves the finals for removing particulate matter. Cleans up our water, so disinfection is more complete. And then from here it goes on to contact basin out of the plant.
And this is the first time we've had an experience with chlorine treatment, I believe, Nick.
Yeah, so what we do, we chlorinate here before it leaves the plant to go to Chatola. It has to be dechlorinated. And as mentioned earlier, if it goes to the reuse side, it has to be rechlorinated. So there's a couple chemicals involved in the process.
Before we get to the last stop, I'd like to ask you about the size of the facility itself.
This plant is designed for 2.8 million gallons. Our flow is approximately 1.8 million gallons currently. And I don't expect that to change a whole lot because of the water condition that we have here in Hayes.
And finally, could you tell me about the tests? We always wonder about tests that are involved in the treatment plant and what you go through.
Right. We do numerous tests throughout the day, the operators do, on quality of water. We have to keep track of the chlorine residuals, the DO, pH, all those kind of things, and that has to go on our report. And that's where we have to chlorinate one way, dechlorinate another way. And so the stuff that we put on our monitoring report, we send out to a third-party lab, which is it kind of takes the burden off of us, but they can't say we're falsifying things. We just report what they send back to us. We send them the samples, they do a test, we report it.
The facility itself then not only includes all of the pumps that we've talked about and all of the other facilities, the wiring and such, but it's the grounds themselves, and what a really attractive place it is.
Thank you. That's good of my crew. I have an excellent crew. They don't only just take care of the grounds, that's just something you see. It's important to me to have that look well. But they do an excellent job on keeping all this equipment running. Sometimes we get scattered around with multiple situations, but they're very reliable, and I'm very proud of them.
We're at the wastewater treatment plant once again with Superintendent Roger Moerke, and we've reached the final stage, Roger.
That's correct. This is what we call the effluent. After all the processes in the plant's been disinfected, had time to disinfect, and then this is where it leaves the plant and it heads out to Chatola Creek.
This particular area goes to Chatola. The other area goes to the golf course during season.
Correct. Right behind us, there's kind of a splitter box. Either goes for reuse or goes to Chatola Creek.
And that's our tour of the wastewater treatment plant with the Superintendent, Roger Moerke, and our community connection. Thanks for watching.